Welcome to Chautauqua People. I'm John V. My guest today is Rita Auerbach, an artist whose work is well known among Chautauquans. She's a native of Western New York, attended the Auerbach Art School, and earned both bachelor's and master's degrees from Buffalo State, where she met her husband. She followed him into the Navy and lived several years in Morocco and then returned to teaching and served there for 20 years in the Clarence school system at both the junior high and senior high levels. She has the best housing plan ever currently, fall and spring in Kenmore, New York, winter in St. Petersburg, Florida, and summer in Chautauqua. Rita, welcome to Chautauqua People. Tell me, when you were doing art, what was the emphasis of your work?
I mainly am motivated about architecture. I've always loved architecture. Actually, my 7th grade teacher taught me to interpret perspective, how to make a 3-dimensional object on a 2-dimensional surface. And I took to that. And that meant I could make buildings. And when I was in high school, and the guidance counselor asked what I wanted to be, I said, I need to be an architect. And she didn't say that was possible. Nurse, secretary, teacher, choose.
And so how did you respond to that?
Well, it was apparent that the nursing with the blood wasn't going to work. And I couldn't type, and I didn't want to do shorthand. So the art was possible because much younger, when I was about 10 or 11 years old, my sister and I shared a bedroom, and we discovered that we were really sneaky, making little doodles on our bedroom wall. I would do a doodle behind a bedstand, and then she would do a doodle, and we went on doing that for quite a while. And then one day, our mother said to us after school, "Girls, I've been in your bedroom. I see what you're doing. You're sneaking around. You don't have to do that. These are your walls. It's your bedroom. You can do whatever you like." She gave us permission to make art. So choosing art was what I did.
And you and the sister probably filled the walls.
We filled the walls. All through our teenage years, we rushed home from school, waiting to get at those walls, the ceilings. We did everything. She was a woman before her time.
Mm-hmm. And then what happened when you had to leave the house? Did it get painted over? Or?
Oh, we met the people later who said it took layers and layers of paint to cover the walls. And I thought, well, that's up to you. We had our day and we became artists.
Right. Now, were there any materials that you later chose to work with in particular?
Well, there was a point, you know, in college at Auerbach Art School, it was mostly oil painting and some printmaking. But having 3 children later and realizing, you know, I have an art career.
Mm-hmm.
So during their nap time, I would open a set of watercolor paints and dibble along until finally about the mid-'80s. There was a group of artists that I was aware of who liked watercolor. Mm-hmm. We got together and formed the Niagara Frontier Watercolor Society. And that was the beginning of my work being exhibited in a professional level, you know, at a nice venue. And things just blossomed from that point on.
Mm-hmm. When I look at your work, I think of happy colors. Was that an accident, or was that what you felt?
Well, watercolor allows that. You know, I don't use any black paint, and I don't use any white paint. I'm what you call a traditionalist. In my paintings, if you see a white wicker chair, it's because I painted the holes and left the white paint. And by magic, out came a wicker chair.
And you paint the holes gray or something? You don't have any black?
No gray. Logically, the wicker chair would be on a porch. Mm-hmm. So behind it would be maybe a garden or even the lake, Chautauqua Lake. And so I learned to look in the negative space and paint away. And yes, color. Color, of course. Color is what makes us happy and smile and sets a mood.
My goodness. Now, let's ask him to go back for a moment to Clarence. And did the New York State requirements change for art that affected you in any significant way?
Yes, I started teaching in Clarence in 1974. Actually, I was hired short-term to fill in on a teacher that was leaving. And I taught at the 7-8 level. That was called junior high at the time. And that was general art. And boy, I really loved those 7 and 8 graders. They were little demons, but when they got in the art room, I made sure they had an interesting time and experimented with wonderful ideas and mediums. And that was for 10 years. And then when New York State required art or music for every graduate, the high school did not have enough teachers. So the high school principal requested me to go up there, and I did. And you know, I had several of those 7th and 8th graders come into my class in high school. If they weren't a music major, they had to take a general art class.
And so you got to see them then. Now, were you teaching watercolor then at Clarence? Well,
during that time, I was also developing my professional career. That would be, you know, weekends, holidays, and an agent in Buffalo discovered my work and started to place it in corporate collections, law firms, businesses around Western New York. So I convinced my principal for me to offer an elective in watercolor, and it worked. I taught one class, one semester, and then 2, 3, 4. I retired in 1994, and I was teaching all watercolor classes at Clarence High School.
How many sections was that?
5.
5 sections.
Yeah.
So that must have been a thing the kids knew. That's one of our real strong points at Clarence.
Well, I hope so. And, you know, it was beginning watercolor, advanced watercolor, and independent study. You know, I couldn't keep them away, but I'm glad because that's what I love to do. I can teach what I love to do.
And Clarence has a very strong academic reputation, so that
great system.
That fits that they would have had somebody doing such work. So you're at Clarence, you're teaching. Your husband is in education also. And how did you make your way to Chautauqua?
One afternoon, about in the mid-60s, late 60s, I believe, a college sorority sister called me from Chautauqua and said she and her husband are host and hostess of the Mayflower. And they had an empty room on the weekend. It was all paid for. Come down, she said, I think you should see this place. So we got mother to babysit the kids, and Dick and I came. And maybe many have this feeling, but I stepped on that brick walk and went down to the square, and I was hooked. And being in the Mayflower on the 4th floor, under the eaves, with the bats pitter-pattering over our heads, we had the full Chautauqua experience.
You got the genuine experience with the bats then,
didn't you?
didn't you?
And we've been coming ever since.
Right. So where did you stay after that first year at Chautauqua?
I stayed at the Mayflower many times, but as the years went on, my husband was the type that said, even though I was begging, let's buy a place, he only wanted to own one home, and that was our home in the Buffalo area. So I rented everywhere, everywhere, really everywhere, all over the grounds.
And so you got to know the grounds before you made a commitment then?
Yes.
In that process. And when did you start exhibiting your work at Chautauqua?
Well, I started somewhere in that period of early, probably 70s. There was a shop down on the lake at the building called the Arcade, and it was the Bell Tower. And I presented a few of my Chautauqua paintings, and he said, yes, let's try it. And I sold the very first one to Mary Louise.
Who was my aunt.
Who is your aunt. And who was a colleague at Clarence Schools as well. And that was the beginning of the first patronage of my work in Chautauqua, and not the last.
Now, where else have you exhibited your work at Chautauqua?
In the last, oh my goodness, let me think, 20 or more years, Pat Finson, who owns the shop in St. Elmo, approached me and said, Rita, how about if we do an exclusive here at Chautauqua? And I thought that was perfect. So Pat shows my work exclusively in the Chautauqua warehouse on the Colonnade, who is owned by Ruth, who is Pat's daughter. Both venues have my art, and that's it.
And that takes care of it.
That takes care of it.
Now, what were the high points of your Chautauqua experience?
Well, when I retired from Clarence in 1994, it was then that I agreed to teach watercolor in Chautauqua. And I started with week-long courses. I taught a couple days a week. I taught full immersion. And I did that for 20 years, teaching watercolor in Chautauqua. But one of the really highlight experiences for me in Chautauqua was in 1986 when Dan Bratton, president, had announced that there would be a Chautauqua conference going to the Soviet Union, and that it would be a cultural exchange, and musicians, dancers, entertainers would be on this conference. And whatever it was that moved me, I said, I need to go. I need to be a delegate in that conference. And it took a lot of convincing. I had to convince Dr. Bratton that I needed this space, that I'm a visual artist, and that needed to be represented. And he eventually agreed, but not officially. And since the event occurred in early October, 35 years ago, this year.
Wow.
I needed to get permission from my principal to be out of school. And I'm going to tell you, it took all of what I could muster to convince him, let me go.
But did he concur eventually?
Well, he concurred because I said, my mission in the Soviet Union is to create an art exchange with my students here in Clarence and students somewhere in the Soviet Union, because my mission was to show and prove that art is a common language, that we can all speak visually and understand each other. So that was my mission, and he granted me permission to leave.
So how long were you gone?
We were gone 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
And I packed student artwork, and working with my favorite English teacher, she assisted the students to write a very concise autobiography and include photographs. So I could match the artwork with the person. And I decided when I find an art school, this is going to be my gift.
And what happened then?
Well, we got to Riga, Latvia. Mm-hmm. That's where the actual conference took place. They chose that place because there's a site on the water that is somewhat similar to a summer resort like Chautauqua. Mm-hmm. And it was lovely. All during that entire trip, I carried a very large sketchbook. And as an artist, I don't take pictures. In this case, I didn't want to encumber myself, but I draw. I draw what I see. I do to this day. But on that trip, I felt my sketchbook would be my way of achieving this experience, whatever was going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I did. I sketched the scenery. I sketched the speakers. I walked the streets. I did whatever I could.
And what became of those sketches?
Well, everything about that trip was emotionally exciting. Mm-hmm. As I said, my mission, was this art school, but we hadn't seen an art school. We hadn't actually known of one. So I discovered near the very last several days of the conference that there was a school not far from where I was located. So I think I spoke to someone, I'm not sure who, and they escorted me over to the school, and I had my portfolio. An English teacher opened the door, welcomed us, and in I went. And all the students were there. They all spoke beautiful English, so we could converse. And I shared the portfolio. I had them enjoy whatever they wanted to speak to me about, and I left. And then the English teacher asked me if we could talk, if we could have a conversation. He had never spoken English to an English-speaking person except his professor at the university to learn English. And he was a young boy, and I learned that his birthday was the actual day and year of my daughter.
Goodness.
So, it was a lovely thing. And he had said to me, "Tomorrow I need for you to meet because I have something for you." Very customary. You give a gift, you have to receive a gift. You get an invitation, you have to get an invitation. So, mission accomplished for me, at least. I got the art portfolio in an art school. But that night in my room, I got a phone call from Dr. Bratton saying, "Rita, we're in trouble." I thought right away, uh-oh, I went off the beaten track. I did this, but that wasn't it. He said, "Tomorrow at the close of the conference is going to be an art exchange. And we don't have a gift. And we know you have a sketchbook. And we would like your sketchbook to be our gift from Chautauqua to the Soviet." And I said, "No, I can't give you my sketchbook."
You told Dr. Bratton no?
I said no. But if we could get to a Xerox machine, he said, "Rita, a Xerox machine? I don't think so." So the plan was that he would bring me up on stage and that I would be introduced as the official artist, and we had yet to go to Moscow, so the book was not, or the sketchbook was not complete.
Mm-hmm.
And that was good. That was a good reason for me not to give it up, because the plan was we would reproduce it then and make the gift, which we did, and it went to the Soviet embassy in Washington. But meanwhile, I had to meet with that English teacher, which I did the next morning, and he gave me a portfolio of his students' artwork along with their autobiographies and their photographs. Now, to set the stage, that was before the Baltic states were freed in 1990 or 91.
Mm-hmm.
And these students were all Latvians, and they said so in their letters. It was really profound.
So the letter said, "I'm Latvian." It didn't say, "I'm Soviet."
No. It said, "I am a Latvian name, and I am Latvian, and I love art, and I have my sister and a brother." Those were the letters. I didn't look at them right away. But the issue now was to get that portfolio out of the Soviet Union to get home.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, my roommate was M.T. Menino, who was then the program chair, and she had a large trunk with the artists, the ballet dancers' costumes and music by the musicians, the violinists, and Grover Washington, the jazz musician, in a big trunk. And I asked her if I could put the portfolio in the trunk, and she said, "Rita, I'm going out of the room, and I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to know anything." So I emptied the trunk and put the portfolio in the bottom, put back everything that was packed, and we went to the airport. And I had spoken to some of the delegates with us were from Washington, mm-hmm. with the State Department. They were the official informers to us about the conference and what we would, and they were doing their conferencing with the important representatives of the Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm.
And they had told me that taking art out of the Soviet Union took a lot of official stamps, stamps, certificates, documentation. And if they discovered that art, there would be nothing that they could do.
And art you created?
Art that I took, these students' art, in the trunk, going home.
Mm-hmm.
So everyone went ahead of us, out of, at the airport. They all went through security, and I was the last one to go. The trunk was the last to go. MT Menino was cleared, but they opened the trunk and they started to take out everything. All of our entertainers were given gifts, and the inspectors actually took off the ribbons, opened the boxes to see what was in the gifts. They took out the music, they took out the ballet outfits, and they kept removing and removing, and I was still back. I had not been cleared yet. And for whatever wonderful reason, they didn't go any further, and they put it all back. And the trunk went through, and so did I.
Goodness, goodness. So you brought this stuff home. Now, I understand you had some drawings which you created, and you published a book showing them. And I wonder if you could tell us about some of these drawings.
Well, I did make copies of the original sketchbook.
Mm-hmm.
But I started to talk, in fact, I went back to Clarence and I started to talk about my trip. And my husband said to me, now wait a minute, you need to publish your own book, not with just sketches, which became the official gift, the copies. They went to the Soviet embassy. So I decided I needed to do that. I needed to tell my story. And there were so many side stories about visiting and so forth. So I did. I published this book, and I did a painting. This is my cover, and this is Riga, Latvia. And this book, I self-published. I made about, I think, 300 copies, and the delegates on the trip all asked for a copy. So I knew I had a moneymaker, maybe, but it also had documentation of this wonderful journey.
Mm-hmm.
So my story is sketches and reflections of a journey. And you see, this one is dedicated to the Smith Memorial Library. I took it out of the library today for us to see. I only have 2 or 3 copies left of my own. But I'll show you a few of the sketches.
We'd love to see them.
That I absolutely adore doing. Like, this is very simple, but these are our musicians. Musicians that accompanied us on the trip. Mm-hmm. There's Karen Akers, jazz violin or guitarist. The names are there and they sign them.
Mm-hmm.
Everything about the trip was monumental, to me, of course, because what did I know? Certainly I didn't know anything about the Soviet Union when I went there. This was probably the first exposure to what the Soviets have done to a cathedral. This is the Dome Cathedral, and I sat in the back, and our wonderful musician, Ron Richardson, accompanied the Latvian Riga, the Riga Boys Choir, to sing Jesus Loves Me.
Wow.
I mean, profoundly unheard of, you might say.
Mm-hmm.
So I did everything that I did. I did what I wanted to do. I made an art exchange. We got back from the Soviet Union. Here's another one of my on-site sketches from...
There's the architecture.
Yeah. This is the Kremlin.
Mm-hmm.
St. Basil's Cathedral.
Mm-hmm.
This is in Moscow. So this was after leaving the conference. And yes, I can say that mission accomplished. Art is a common language. So you may know that that was in 1986. And in 1987, a delegation of Soviets, some from Latvia and Moscow, came to Chautauqua. And Chautauqua people, opened their homes and welcomed all the delegation, and there was reflection about the Soviet trip. And at one point at a tea party, I was invited, and a Soviet woman, right away said to me, the artist. Yeah. And she said, I want to invite you back to Riga, Latvia, to have an exhibition. You will be the first American artist to have a one-artist show in the Art Academy in Riga.
Whoa.
I know, whoa. I kind of said to her, yeah, whoa. But I chose to go back for multiple reasons, and certainly I did the very next year. And I created about 18 paintings. Half were of Buffalo, Western New York, and the other half were of Chautauqua. They wanted to see Chautauqua, the real thing, so my exhibition did that.
And then you returned, this time probably without any difficulty, getting through the authorities.
Now, this time I had a Soviet guide all the time with me. I had my own chosen. I asked that the English teacher be my interpreter. I had found out that he had been interrogated after our initial gathering, and that he was in jeopardy. And I felt, well, I'll go back, I'll do this exhibition. It's extraordinary for me as an artist, but I needed very much to make sure he was safe and that he would be my official guide.
And so how did you protect him then?
That was because now he had to interpret everything for me. And at the end of this visit in my exhibition, which was only 5 days, they had the frames already. I carried the paintings with me. Over 600 people came to see my show. I don't get that anywhere. But on the last day, I was asked to meet with all the Soviet important people. And they brought me into a glorious room with beautiful teak furniture and teacups and everything, and Soviets on the one side speaking to me, asking me questions, and my interpreter. We did a back and forth, and I simply said, for us to be really sharing as we say we want to, then I want to invite art students from the art school to come to my school and be our guests and live in our homes. And they said, okay, we can do that.
How many came?
We had 10 come, and they also said to me, okay, do an art exchange. Can you do a ballet exchange? I said, well, sure. Probably, I didn't say probably. I said, oh, yes, I can do that too. So when I got back to Clarence, I went to my principal and I said, great trip. I've invited 10 Latvian Soviet students to our home. What do you think? Next year. He said, great, bring them on. So they did. And then I asked a couple of my classes, does anyone do ballet? And one young lady said yes. And her teacher is Maris Battaglia. And lo and behold, when I called her, if she wanted to do a ballet exchange with her academy and the Riga Ballet School, she went, of course, that's where Godunov and the other main, masterful Russian ballet dancers are from. And it also turns out that she has been the instructor of ballet of students in Chautauqua as well.
So that all came together.
Everything came around.
Wonderful.
It was terrific.
So that was the high point of the Chautauqua experience over many years.
I would say above everything I have done, the joy of teaching, the joy of making my work, and the thrill of having people wanting to acquire it, those are all fabulous. But Chautauqua allowed me this particular experience that was really life-changing.
Now, we are out of time, but I got one more question. I would let you finish.
Okay.
And this is, I guess, the teacher in me coming through. That is, if a young Chautauquan came to you and expressed an interest in having a career in art, what would be your advice?
Art is work like any career, and you need commitment. Stick to it if you wish to do it. I'm about the arts. I would say the same. I think a violin teacher or a dancing teacher or anyone who sees that kind of interest and gift in a student would say, It's a lot of work. You may not make a living out of it, but if you love it, you need to pursue it. And, you know, for me, I would always say consider the teaching aspect. Teach that as well. Do it, make a career out of it, and teach it. Great.
We are out of time. This has been fun. Anything else we need to add we haven't covered?
Lots.
You'll have to come back. This has been fun, and seriously, do come back.
Thank you.